Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's guest is the mother of a son with type 1 diabetes. He's 8 years old and has some gut health issues. There's lots of thyroid stuff in the family. We'll even have a glucagon story towards the end of the interview. And this mom has some health issues of her own. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. drinkag1.com/juicebox. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginning series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginning series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player. US Med is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and we've been getting our diabetes supplies from US Med for years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Use the link or the number, get your free benefits check, and get started today with US Med. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes and their MiniMed 780G system, designed to help ease the burden of diabetes management. Imagine fewer worries about missed boluses or miscalculated carbs, thanks to meal detection technology and automatic correction doses. Learn more and get started today at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox.
Hi, I am Thalia. I'm a mom of one type 1 diabetic, a boy who's 8 years old.
How do Caucasian people mispronounce your name?
Thalia, Dalia, Thalia.
Thalia?
Sometimes I'm just T at work, just a letter.
Because, why is it? Because I have to I don't know how to salsa up your name when I'm talking because I'm so Caucasian. That is really the problem. Say it again.
Thalia.
Thalia?
Yeah.
Did I do it?
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. You're like, no, you didn't.
Try.
Yeah.
Try one more time.
Wait, hold on. Thalia?
Yeah, that's good. That was good. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to try. But it's definitely going to come out like I'm ordering a taco. And I'm I'm definitely going to be like, can I get the chimmy? I'm definitely going to mess it up. But I'm going to try my hard. Thalia. Okay. So what's the deal? Do I just kind of have to feel it in my soul or something? Is it in my hips? Where am I not getting it?
The TH is a lot softer. I mean, you said it pretty softly. It's Thalia. Thalia.
Like that. Thalia. All right. I'm going to do my best. But I'm going to call you T at some point.
Yeah, I know.
And I apologize ahead of time. And that's what I'm going to say.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Just a letter is fine.
I also can't dance. So please don't judge me on this.
I'm judging you.
Thank you. What made you want to come on the podcast?
I wanted to add my voice to all the others. The podcast really helped me have all these experiences under my belt. So when things happened in my daily life with my son, I felt like I had already had those experiences. I was there. I did that. Okay, I can do this, move on. Even though that really never happened to me. So I just wanted to add to that.
So someone else could do it. So interesting. I'm sure sometimes I say stuff like this and people are like, yeah, dummy, you don't know that about your own podcast. But I really don't. I don't say this much anymore. I used to say it more when I was starting out, but I'm just recording. And I don't really have, there's some things I plan for, but generally speaking, I'm not thinking I'll say this and then they'll understand that. I don't really do it that way. But are you saying that the podcast acts almost like a flight simulator for you?
Yes.
Is that right? So once you're in the plane and a bird hits the engine, you go, oh, I've already done this. I know what to do.
Exactly. I feel like everybody's collective experiences on the podcast are my own. That's how I feel because I already know what to do. Okay, that didn't work for that person. I'm not going to do that again. It's exactly the way you described it.
that's so interesting. And so when something pops up that is technically the first time for you that a lot of people find like frightening or overwhelming or something, does it actually alleviate those issues as well?
Yes, yes. I don't feel stressed out. I used to feel a lot of stress and anxiety in the beginning of his diagnosis. I mean, I've even had like seizures related to stress. And I don't feel any stress at all about unknown situations or random things that happen anymore. Just because these are all tools in my belt now, all these experiences.
Wow, Thalia, you've had stress-induced seizures?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
In the first like 3 months, I remember not knowing what low was. Like we left the hospital, his lips were blue, his blood sugar we tested was like 40. And I'm like, this is great. He's not through 300, I didn't know what low was. And then once I finally understood, wait, like doing my own research, low means like death, basically, seizures and horrible things can happen. I used to run around the house like, oh my God, he's 50, he's 60, whatever. And it got to the point where we check his blood sugar. My son would see his number. He was 4 at the time. And he would also run around. It was like crazy in our house in the very beginning. And I would just be sitting down doing nothing, like playing chess or I don't know, just doing nothing, anything at all. And I would just like pass out. I don't know if it was because of lack of sleep. I don't know if it was just me thinking about overthinking things, but I would just like have tunnel vision and just pass out.
You pass out, you wouldn't seize. Would you shake and have like...
My family has told me that I would shake a little bit. My eyes would roll back. I wasn't foaming. I wasn't like spitting up, but that's what would happen to me.
Wow. Did you end up going to a therapist or psychologist for that? Or how did you handle that? Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, who is making life with diabetes easier with the MiniMed 780G system. The MiniMed 780G automated insulin delivery system anticipates, adjusts, and corrects every 5 minutes. Real-world results show people achieving up to 80% time in range with recommended settings without increasing lows, but of course, individual results may vary. The 780G works around the clock so you can focus on what matters. Have you heard about Medtronic's extended infusion set? It's the first and only infusion set labeled for up to a 7-day wear. This feature is repeatedly asked for, and Medtronic has delivered. 97% of people using the 780G reported that they could manage their diabetes without major disruptions of sleep. They felt more free to eat what they wanted, and they felt less stress with fewer alarms and alerts. You can't beat that. Learn more about how you can spend less time and effort managing your diabetes by visiting medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox. Diabetes comes with a lot of things to remember, so it's nice when someone takes something off of your plate. US Med has done that for us. When it's time for Ardent supplies to be refreshed, we get an email. Rolls up and in your inbox says, "Hi Ardent, this is your friendly reorder email from US Med." You open up the email, it's a big button that says, "Click here to reorder," and you're done. Finally, somebody taking away a responsibility instead of adding one. US Med has done that for us. An email arrives, we click on a link, and the next thing you know, your products are at the front door. That simple. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. I never have to wonder if Ardent has enough supplies. I click on one link, I open up a box, I put the stuff in the drawer, and we're done. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and the Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide, over 800 private insurers, and all you have to do to get started is call 888-721-1514 or go to my link, usmed.com/juicebox. Using that number or my link helps to support the production of the Juicebox podcast.
I got better with diabetes. That's what happened.
I don't need a therapist. I just need to stop seeing a 50 blood sugar so much.
Yes.
Listen, just for people's edification, a stress-induced seizure, also known as a psychogenic non-epileptic seizure, is a type of seizure that occurs due to psychological factors rather than abnormal electrical activity in the brain. It goes on, but that's apparently actually a thing. I had never heard of that before. That's so interesting. I love that people still say things that I'm like, I've never heard that before. And so let's be clear. Instead of going to a psychologist and saying, hey, I keep like having seizures from stress, you listen to a podcast, got better at diabetes, and they stopped happening.
Yeah, exactly.
For free, everybody. I didn't charge her for that.
For free.
Yeah, right.
After a $300 bill from a brain doctor, they're called. I was like, I'm just going to listen to this podcast.
The brain guy got $300 and I got nothing?
Nothing.
Unbelievable. It's all right. I'll use the advertiser's money and pay my bills. It's not a big deal.
Thank you.
Honestly, like I'm joking about that, but I'm super proud of that, by the way. Again, so many episodes. So if you're newer to the show, I'm proud that like some people are like, oh, you take ads. I'm like, I take ads so that Leah can listen to the podcast for free. Like, and then I can make the podcast. Like it's 9:00 right now on a Wednesday morning, 6 months before this podcast is going to air. Like this is a real job, you know, and, you know, somebody's got to pay the water bill, et cetera, and send my kids to college and everything. And I don't want it to be you. Like, I don't want to take $300 from you and from the other and from everybody listening so that I can make a podcast. Like I want it to be free. I don't think your health and happiness should cost you extra money.
And I don't think people would listen if I had to pay $1 every time I listen to an episode. There's definitely going to be limited amount of episodes I could listen to. So I hear that.
I made that point to a company a few years ago. They came to me and they said, you should monetize your podcast. You can get rid of all your advertisers and your fans won't have to listen to ads. They'll be so thrilled, etc. And you charge them a monthly fee to listen or a buy the episode fee. Listen, I sat in a meeting and the lady said to me, how many downloads do you have? And it was a few years ago. And back then I think I had like 10 million downloads. Mm-hmm. And she goes, what if you just charged each one of them $1 for a download? You'd have $10 million. And I went, no, I wouldn't. And she goes, oh, no. And I was like, stop. I was like, as soon as you put a barrier to entry, people are going to stop. They're not going to listen. You can't promise. Like, I mean, your story is really cool and I appreciate you sharing it. But can you imagine the ad? I'd be like, listen, are you having stress-induced seizures? Just listen to the podcast. They'll go away. Like, you know, no, people would be like, oh my God, it's crackpot. I shut the meeting down very quickly because I was like, this is not okay. I'm like, everyone who wants it needs to be able to get it. I'm just going to stick with my ad model. And she tried, she pressed and pressed. And I was like, no, it's not how it's going to work. Like I'll keep a small percent of listeners. I won't make nearly as much money as you're saying. And on top of that, I'm going to feel terrible about all the people who are now not listening to the podcast. And I take your point too, because when it's free, and it's a story of you, like a lady who's got a kid with diabetes, but I'm an adult and I have diabetes and I don't listen because I'm like, oh, that has nothing to do with me and I'm not going to pay $1 for it. But if suddenly it's free, maybe you wind it up and give it a shot. And, 20 minutes into it, you're like, oh my God, I have stress-induced seizures. I didn't even know what they were. Like, who knows, right? So, okay.
Nuggets of information in every episode, like small little things.
Thank you. I try. Okay. By the way, how long into your child's diagnosis did those seizures happen, and how long did it take you to get rid of them?
Not long. So it was like 2 months into diagnosis that started happening. And then once I got pretty good at diabetes, because I got pretty good pretty quickly because I found you like out of the hospital. It just took me a little while to start listening. Mm-hmm. And maybe within 5 months post-diagnosis, they were gone. Like just one day, they just stopped.
I'm so glad.
And I don't know exactly the day. They just stopped.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad for you. Tell me a little bit about the diagnosis story. How did you figure it out?
So we're originally from New York and we moved to Georgia sometime in 2020. So in the summertime. And suddenly my son starts school. He's 4 and he's in pre-K and he just is sleeping all the time. Like he comes home from school and he sleeps and then he eats like crazy and just sleeps and his behavior is the worst. And I'm like, what is happening? And I go on Google And Google's telling me he's depressed because we moved.
He's depressed.
And that's not at all what happened. Yeah. I'm like, my 4-year-old is depressed. What are we going to do? We got to go back to New York. Like, this is terrible.
Honey, put all this stuff back in the trunk. We got to get out of here. Look what's happened to the boy. He doesn't like the South.
Exactly. I'm like, I don't like the South. He doesn't like the South. Let's go. That's not at all what happened. So one day in school, he's hyperventilating. I forgot what that's called.
The Kussmaul respirations?
Kussmaul respirations.
Yeah.
He's doing that. He's got throw up on his face because he was throwing up. He was in DK. His lips are blue. He's passing out. I'm like smacking him in the back of a car. Like, wake up, wake up. Jeez. And we take him to like a local urgent care where they test a bunch of things. They finally check his blood sugar, and that was over 400. We go to the hospital. I think I heard this on a recent episode too. The doctor just comes in. This is classic type 1 diabetes and walks out. I'm like, what? I hear the word diabetes and instantly cry. Like every time somebody walks in and says diabetes at that point, I just cry. Mm-hmm. And then my son, again, he's 4 at the time. He just looks over and says, I'm so sorry I have diabetes. And it was like a light switch. I said, I'm not going to cry anymore. Every time somebody says diabetes, it just was a moment for me.
Your 4-year-old was apologizing to you for having diabetes?
Yes.
Oh, that
because
probably
every
broke
time
your
somebody
heart.
would come in, yes. They would say, oh, the diabetes. And I would just cry. And I don't ever want him to feel like he did it to himself or it's such a burden on me.
Yeah.
And from that moment, I was like, okay, this is not going to be hard on me. I'm not going to let him show it. And then I have seizures, right?
You pushed it. You're like, I'll hold it in. Like, and your body was like, no, you won't.
Right.
How old were you at that point?
That was 4 years ago. And I'm 31. So how old was I?
27?
Yeah, 27. There you go.
Is he your first?
Yes, he's my first.
Okay. How long had you been married?
Well, we've been married for 10 years this year. So
since you were 21. So you had been married for like 6 years at that point, and he was 4.
Yes.
So you were married for 2 years. You made a baby. 4 years later, it's telling you, "I'm sorry," in a hospital, and you're like, "Oh, this is going great." I used to live in New York.
Right.
I used to be cool. I lived in. What happened?
Exactly. I went from like New York life to this.
Wow. Can I ask like about family background? Like now that you've had time to look at it, are there other autoimmune issues in your family on either side, your husband or you?
So we have a lot of thyroid disorders. My husband has Hashimoto's. A lot of my cousins, my sister, my aunts have, I don't know if it's Hashimoto or not, but they have thyroid diseases. Like they have some kind of disorder, whether it's overactive, underactive. My husband has two cousins that have type 1 on his side. So, and then I have some type 2 on my side.
What's your background?
Me, I'm Dominican and Puerto Rican.
Okay. How about him?
He's Yemeni.
Wow, look at you. Where'd you get him? That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. At university.
Oh, you got him. You found him at college. Very nice. Yeah. Do you miss New York?
A lot.
Yeah.
I went through a year of depression when we first came.
Are you sure you didn't have type 1 diabetes? No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
Arden went to college in Georgia, and she completed 2 years and then came home and this summer said, I do not want to go back. And it wasn't just about the South. Like, she didn't love it in the South, but like if that was the only issue for her, it would have been fine. She had a lot of other issues. I don't know that I'm like able to talk about because they're not mine, but there were a lot about the ineptitude of the school and the lack of direction she was getting. So she's pivoting and going to a different school now. Actually, she's going to change her major and go to a completely different place. Okay. But as soon as I took her to another place and it was more city-like, she's like, this is better. Like just talking about the geography, she's like, this is better for me. And I'm like, okay. So it just wasn't for her. And I know other people, by the way, who live there and just love it. So I'm not saying, anything. But, if you're used to something, if you're used to walking to things, if you're used to, even the landscape, what things look like, it can be shocking to change drastically, I would imagine.
Yeah, especially seeing people every day, whether they care about you or not, just like seeing people and then going to a place where you literally don't see people unless you're in a supermarket. or something like that, like that's a big change.
You felt alone.
Yes. Very, very alone.
And then the diabetes happened on top of all that.
Yes. And I have a really nice support group. Like my family is so supportive. My son was diagnosed and my mom retired and moved in with me.
Oh.
My aunt, who has type 2 diabetes, was like, I'm going to come down for a week and help you. She didn't help at all. Like she just sat around, talked and ate, and didn't help me she didn't help with one finger stick. I'm like, why did you come?
She's like, I could use a vacation. I'm going to your house.
Right. But at least like she came, you know?
Yeah. That's funny. She didn't help at all. That was hilarious. I'm sorry.
I'm like, what?
Like my aunt came. She didn't help.
I'm like, you have type 2 diabetes. Like, this is where you tell me what high and low. Help me with a finger stick. Help me with something. Help me with one overnight because we didn't have a Dexcom right away. I'm like, I don't know. Nothing.
Do you think she got there and just recognized that what she knew didn't feel applicable to you?
I don't know, but she didn't even really talk about diabetes when she came. It was like, let me hang out with my sister, who's my mom, you know?
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Yeah, let's go somewhere warm and I'll talk to my sister for a week. I hear it. Okay, never mind. I thought maybe it was diabetes related, but it's not. Okay, so people come down. So you did have some support, but they don't really know what to do, right? It's just sort of like they're there.
Exactly. They're just there and I'm left with this new thing that I don't know anything about. I got really, really great support from my husband's mom, so my mother-in-law, who has type 2 diabetes, and she's on insulin. And she called me maybe 3 days after his diagnosis and gave me this huge lecture. And she kind of reminds me of you now that I've listened to you a lot. And she just said, like, nobody's going to know his diabetes like you. You are the master of his diabetes at this point. You have to educate yourself. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to make your own decisions, change as he's changing, and you can do this. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to do this day and night for until he can do this on his own. And you're going to be able to do this. No doctor's going to know more. No school nurse is going to know more. She said, I have type 2 diabetes. I'm not going to know more than his diabetes than you. And she gave me that empowered me to go like, okay, now I need to go find what I need to know.
Yeah.
She didn't tell me what I needed to know, but she gave me that power of like, you have to do this.
Right. What did you think initially? Like when you're in that hospital and you're crying and then you pull yourself together and you listen to what they're saying, I guess, what did your marching orders feel like leaving the hospital? And then what did they end up actually being? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was count the carbs, give insulin. You can give insulin after food. You can give insulin before food. It doesn't matter. And everything will be fine. Check 2 hours after he eats because he was 4 at the time. And he is an eater. He's been an eater since the day that he could eat, you know?
Yeah.
And I told my doctor that. And I guess they just assume all kids sometimes are picky eaters or don't want to eat. So they said, just give him insulin after. And so it was just that, just count carbs and everything will be okay. Check his blood sugar later. And then it was just like a set number of basal. It was like 6 units a day. And that's that.
I remember being told like, these are the measurements for the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember the day that I realized, oh, that's going to change. Like I didn't even recognize that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
mm-hmm.
I guess on some level you get like they're small and when they grow, they might need more, but nobody like generally speaking says that to you. And so then your kid puts on a couple of pounds because they're growing and that's great. And then all of a sudden you start having bad blood sugars and you're like, I don't know what happened. I'm doing the thing. It just stopped working. And then people say, I really should say this more now because I've gotten away from saying things. Like I used to feel like, oh, I'm repeating myself, but I'm 10 years later and some of this stuff is really important. I should keep saying it. You start with 2 units, they gain weight, you need more. All of a sudden, like I said, you don't know what's happening. It's not working anymore. And you default to, well, that's just diabetes because people say that. You go, oh, I don't know. There was a high blood sugar and then overnight and people go, oh, that's just diabetes. And then you accept that as though there's this unknowable force in diabetes and things go wrong and that's to be expected. And once you accept that, you stop looking for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And now diabetes is happening to you instead of you impacting it. And anyway, it's a phrase that really bothers me. That's just diabetes. It actually makes me upset, but I apologize. Go ahead. Keep telling your story.
I noticed something like I couldn't trust those marching orders right away because the doctor that we have, who you really love, by the way, I won't say her name. Like we had open access to her. We could message her anytime until our 3-month appointment.
Wait, she's been on the podcast. You could say her name.
Oh, okay.
Hasn't she been on?
Yeah, she has.
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to tell your doctor's name, go ahead.
So she told me, go ahead and we'll start bolusing before meals because I kept telling her, well, he's high. He's 400 after meals. I realized, wait, if she can change it from after meals to before meals, and then she can change my carb ratio from this to this with one phone call. Like I thought about my mother-in-law. I'm like, wait, I can do this. Like, this is like, she's guessing. This is a guess. This is hopeful thoughts and praying for good outcomes. Like I can have hopeful thoughts and pray for good outcomes too. And then that's when I started, because she gave me your podcast, well, the name of your podcast in the hospital. So I was like, okay, I just need to listen to this thing. She told me about it. She wouldn't tell me about it if it wasn't something good. And then that's when like everything changed. I started doing basal testing, even with just like a meter. And then I was able to go from 6 units a day to 3 units a day. And that helped a lot with the random lows and running around screaming. Yeah. So that's where it started.
I'd like to highlight that idea for a minute, that a person using man-made insulin, once you realize what comes if you have autonomy about making decisions about dosing, like once you figure out you don't have to go ask somebody to try something, you know how to do it safely, it's an absolute game changer. It's a level up. Like it really is. Like the minute you decide I don't have to wait 3 months to be told that I can increase the basal or that my carb ratio might not be working, that's the fast pass to figuring all this out.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Like if you are sitting
at a notebook.
Did you?
Yeah, that where I would write down like a mad scientist. This did this at this hour, this hour, this hour, this meal. And I think that's where kind of the stress came from. Because that was just logging everything on like pen and paper. But it did help because I felt the strength to be able to do it myself. I mean, we got in our 3-month appointment, his A1C went down to 5.4.
Okay. But you had a lot of lows in the beginning or no?
We did have a lot of lows in the first month. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's because of the basal. But once I fixed the basal through the basal testing, we were good.
That straightened it out. The cause and effect is so important. Like you said, you used a notebook. I don't write things down, but quickly is the wrong word because I wasn't great at this for a number of years. CGM really helped me. Like the advent of a CGM really helped me. But I would just do that like, all right, I did this and then that happened. Like what would I do for that to happen 10 minutes later or 5 minutes sooner or 20 points more in one direction? Like it sounds like more or sooner or later. And I was like, oh, and then I would just keep like adjusting it around. And then you figure out like, oh, if I pre-bolus a meal, I don't get a spike. Like, okay, if, and then people are like, oh, don't you get low like before? I'm like, not if you do it right. Like, and like, I don't know how to explain that. I guess it's probably explained much better in the pro tip series than if I dug into it right now, but it's the idea that's freeing. Like, oh, I can move this. I can try this. Like, it's not going to kill anybody if, the insulin to carb ratio was, I don't know, 1 unit covers 25 carbs and I try to change it to 23 to see what happens. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff.
And waiting and get like hours or days or months and weeks for a response back on that. That's useless. Yeah.
You send a note, even to great doctors. I'm reading between the lines, but if you live in Georgia, then I think I know who your doctor is and you don't have to say their name. But even when you have a very good endocrinologist and that very good endocrinologist is saying to you, you should listen to a podcast, like it tells you there's more to say than I can say to you in this visit. Right. And you're just going to have to go immerse yourself in it for a while until you pop up and you're like, wow, I understand better now. Yeah. And there's no quick answer. I've had people ask me for like it's not as much now as it used to be, but people would say like, well, I don't want to listen to the pro tip series. Just tell me what to do. And I always thought the same thing. I'm like, if I could just tell you what to do, I wouldn't have made the pro tip series. I would have just, I don't know, written down the things to do. It's just not that easy. Like there's a little more to it than just tell me what to do. So you have to be invested enough and have the time and the brain, the headspace to put yourself into it to figure it out. Were you working at that time?
Yes. Yeah. I work from home. So I was working also.
Were you working? Like, or were you like trying to figure out diabetes and like pushing buttons till they didn't fire you?
Yeah, maybe just like clicking my mouse around so it'll keep me active.
You remember when COVID started and there were these guys online that were like setting up these things that would move your mouse for you to keep your computer awake to make it look like you were working? And I was like, oh my God, people are devious. But yeah, but my point is that whether you were in an office or at home, you were distracted and out of your mind. So, you know, it's understandable to not be able to focus. And you're trying to, like you said, hours move into days, right? Like you have a blood sugar gets crazy and the next thing you know, you're chasing it around and it's getting high and it's getting low and you're bouncing and ping-ponging back and forth and you don't know what you're doing. So it just keeps happening. And the entire time that's going on, there is a necessity inside of your heart and your gut telling you, I have to fix this. And yet you have no idea how to do it. And it's overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's for your kid. Like we all want the best for our children.
Sure.
It's like, how do I give that to them when you don't know what you're doing? Well, you have to educate yourself. And this podcast is the education.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it helped you. Do you remember where you started with it and what kind of made you think, oh, I am going to listen to more of this?
I think I just picked a random episode. I was like folding clothes in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep at that time. And I just picked a random episode and just listened and listened and listened until I was like, okay, like I see, I'm gathering the experiences, kind of what I said before. Like I hear this. Okay. Then I stumbled across, I think it was the beginning of the Pro Tip series. I'm like, okay, let me start listening to these. I think you started doing the Defining Diabetes at that time. Those. And it just like gathers over time. Like, so I just picked a random one and I liked it and I kept running.
It's like Tetris.
Yeah.
You know Tetris?
Yes.
Yeah. That's how I think about the podcast because there's no way for me. People will say like, why are the series not all together in the episodes? I'm like, well, that's not how it works. I can't, like, I'm not a machine. I can't turn out 25 episodes, hold on to all of them and put them out in order. Plus, you don't understand how people listen to podcasts. If I put 25 out in a row that built the series, the people who weren't interested in the series, I'd lose as listeners. And like, so you put one out, you know, you work to put another one together. Back then I used to do the editing myself. Like, so it takes time to put them out. But that's how I think about it. Like, keep listening and you'll see a shape and it'll fit in and eventually you'll fill in your box and you'll be good, you know? So.
And to be honest, from the beginning, I don't listen straight. I just jump around. I tried to listen from the beginning once, like where start from episode 1. And I think I got to episode 30 and was like, no, I can't do it like this. I want to just click and listen.
Because it felt like it was going to take forever, or because it was older and you're like, he wasn't as good at this as he is now, or like.
Because it felt like it was going to be like, I was never going to reach to episode 1,000 something, like listening this way. I'm like, and I also want to listen to what's current.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to wait for like the CEO of, you know, the company that makes Afrezza to, I want to listen to that now. I'm not going to wait. So I might as well just jump around and listen to what I want.
My favorite way that people listen is they listen in two directions. So they'll listen to an old episode and then listen in order, but at the same time, they're listening to the new stuff. They kind of go backwards. They almost like burning a candle at both ends. They kind of listen towards the middle. I always thought that was an interesting way. I mean, listen, in a perfect world, the podcast wouldn't have, I don't know what it has now, probably close to 1,300 episodes, but like, I get it. Like, you know, it's a lot. And I hear people sometimes say like, well, there's 1,000 episodes. Like, what am I going to, I don't know where to start. And I always tell them, like, just start listening. Like, just start with this one, start with the latest one, you know, do whatever works, you know, jump around. Who cares? Do what works for you. And then hopefully you'll have the experience. Like, you were the perfect listener to me. Like the way it happened to you is great. Like you heard enough to make you think like, okay, I should keep listening to this. And then you find a little more and find a little more. And eventually you get what you need. And that's my intention. I wish there was a better way to do it. But the way podcast apps are set up, Apple does not let you group things. If they did, I would. You know what I mean? If Apple let me, you'd be able to click on a button that said defining diabetes and see all of them. But that's not. Most people don't build podcasts that are this.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like it's usually just like, here's today's episode, here's tomorrow's episode. They're not connected to each other. It doesn't matter. You know, they're almost like a radio show. But, you know, I just happen to have there's like courses in here basically. And then I've had people say like, well, why don't you set up courses? And I was like, because I'm not a teacher and I'm not a doctor. Like I can't just say to you like, this is a course that'll definitely teach you how to take care of diabetes. I have to tell you, like, I'm not a doctor and this isn't advice. And you're just telling stories and having conversations based on what I've seen. And hopefully it's going to help you.
And there's too many variables for you to teach every single person. Like there's too much to teach so that every person can get it right. You'd have to go through so many different things with them.
Yes.
They're different pumps, they're different insulin, the way they eat. There's just so many, their activity level. Are they in school? Like what kind of work do they do? There's too many things to teach everybody, like one person at a time.
Yeah. And then people are busy or they're fickle and they go like, this doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm not going to listen to this one. Okay. Well, there was something important in there. Like I can't So the answer is, this is the best way I've figured out how to do it. And so far, it seems to be working for a lot of people. So, like, right on. So. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really lovely. So, can I ask you a little more about the stuff that you put on your list?
Yes.
Who has gut issues?
My son.
Okay. And did they start with diabetes?
No, not at diagnosis. So, he was diagnosed again at 4. And around 6 is when we started noticing his stomach was hurting all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, crippling stomach pain and headaches, migraines where he wouldn't want to be out in the sun. He didn't want the lights on. I mean, a little 6-year-old like crumpled in his bed crying because his head hurts and his stomach hurts. Like it was really bad. And that's about the time we also noticed like really crazy behavior. I mean, literal jumping off the wall. You know, people use the phrase, oh, my kid is jumping off the wall. I mean, like feet on the wall, jumping from couch to wall to couch. Like it was nuts.
He wasn't yelling parkour in the middle, was he?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of wish he was. And then there'd be like a reason behind it, you know? It was just like crazy. And so then we did a few tests and obviously we took him to the doctor and specialist. And he has gastritis. It turns out he still has gastritis. So to this day, his gastritis has never gone away. So he's been taking omeprazole since he was 6. He has pica. So that is when you want to eat non-edible items. He eats rocks. He eats paper. He eats tissue. He'll eat like candy wrappers. He'll eat cupcake liners. He'll eat lollipop sticks. Like he eats things that you shouldn't eat.
Is that anything you've ever seen with other family members?
No, I've never even heard of this until this happened to my son.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How is this nutritional? Like, does he have nutritional deficiencies? Does he have low iron or zinc, stuff like that?
So we've done a lot of blood tests and nothing comes up deficient. He just enjoys, he says it's satisfying. And so now I have to be very aware of like, hey, where's your popsicle stick? Put it in the garbage. Or give him a cupcake without the liner, or like ask him to empty out his pockets after school to make sure like the school, like the rocks from the playground aren't in his pocket, or also like snack on them.
Can I go through what I've learned?
Yeah.
So pica is often linked to deficiencies in minerals such as iron, zinc, or other nutrients. The body may trigger cravings for non-food items in an attempt to obtain the lacking nutrients. There's also a possibility that there are psychological factors, more common in individuals with mental health disorders such as obsessive compulsive disorder, autism spectrum disorder, or schizophrenia. It can also occur in individuals with intellectual disabilities. Cultural and societal factors. Consuming certain non-food items is considered normal or holds traditional. He's not doing it for religious reasons. Never mind.
No.
Environmental factor. Can you imagine? He was like, Well, I'm going to tell you why. Let's see. Stress, neglect, or lack of appropriate stimulation in certain environments. Sounds like you're a good mom. I don't think that's probably happening. Not pregnant. Developmental, I shouldn't have just skipped over that. Pregnant women sometimes develop pica, possibly due to hormonal levels, increases in nutritional needs, or cultural practices. More common in children, especially those with developmental. Does he have developmental delays?
No. He is a very smart boy. Yeah.
And certain medical conditions such as iron deficiency, anemia, or celiac. So that's what I got out of ChatGPT 4.0, which, by the way, is so far the bestest version.
Thank you.
Yeah.
ChatGPT.
So that's it. Really interesting. What do you do for that?
Watch him like a hawk. Like, what's in your pocket? Empty them. Like, I just watch him. Like, and we have to, obviously, we talk to him a lot about it. Like, this is not okay. It's going to cause blockages in your intestines. Like, we've had to do multiple clean outs on him, like giving him Miralax and making sure his colon is cleansed.
To like get a Lego out or something like that?
No. Thankfully, he hasn't eaten Legos. It's not toys he eats. It's like rocks and paper. That's what I noticed. That he enjoys eating rocks and paper. That's his taste.
Wow. We used to chew on paper when we were kids, but I think we were just bored out of our minds. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And he's not bored.
No.
Like, he's doing it while he's doing something else. I don't know. Sometimes I think about autism, but he's just so bright and he does so well in school. I'm like, even if it is like, he's just a little bit weird. It's okay. You know?
Do you think it's connected to his stomach issues at all? Like, what if his stomach issues are stopping him from absorbing nutrients?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. Like, and I just can't get my doctors to see things together. Because like his gastroenterologist says, okay, well, we've looked at his stomach. He still has gastritis. He doesn't have celiac. He just needs to poop more. Oh, he's had pica. Take him to a therapist. You know, so
yeah, they don't want to talk about anything that's not their thing.
Exactly.
Have you heard my episodes where we talked about Arden's stomach pain?
A lot. Yes. Yeah, so we do digestive enzymes now.
Okay.
We do have to, like, we get the capsules that have powder in them. So we can pour half of it away, because if we do the whole capsule, it gives him diarrhea.
Okay.
But just half of it is perfect. And it does alleviate a lot of the stomach pain. So like, we struggled with this for a year and a half over the summer. I won't say the summer. Let's say around April, we started doing the digestive enzymes, and that has helped tremendously.
Okay.
So, but there's still underlying pain. Like if he doesn't have the digestive enzyme, or
then he has an issue. I can't believe I'm going to ask you this. Does his poop come out well formed, or is it thin?
Yes,
it does. Okay,
it does.
Does he have trouble passing it? Does he go every day?
He goes almost every day, but his farts smell like death.
That's not funny. It's not funny, but
terrible. It's like, we know when he's past gas. Everybody knows.
How do you guys eat? Do you eat well, or is it real cultural? Maybe there's cultural issues like with the food you're eating?
We definitely eat very American food, okay?
He does.
I mean, we eat Spanish food. We eat rice and beans and chicken. He doesn't eat salad, but he'll eat vegetables. He's a big vegetable and meat eater. So even when I eat rice and beans, he's eating the zucchini and chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not because I tell him to not eat rice. He just doesn't want to eat rice.
You know, we just had our first family vacation in like 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my son commented, as soon as we got there, he's like, you know, all the like little issues I have with my stomach are gone. Like he's like, and I'm looking at everything we're eating here, and it's all kind of fresh, and like it was a lot of seafood, stuff like that. And he's like, everything's great. And he said he got home, the first day he was home, he ran out to a deli and got a bagel with like an egg and bacon on it. And he's like, an hour later, I was sick. And, you know, and don't say, oh, he had bread in the other place too. You know what I mean? Like, he was like, he's 24 and he's like, you know, this food is probably killing us, right? And I was like, I mean, it's hard to argue with. So have you tried like an elimination diet, like remove certain things, stuck with real foods to see if they alleviate his problems? Because maybe he just isn't doing well with that stuff.
Well, when he was first diagnosed, we threw out all the carbs. And it was very extreme, but we've gone through a lot of different styles of eating since his diagnosis. So we've tried like no carbs, like just meat and vegetable and like not even fruit, like just minimal amounts of carbs. And I could tell he was stressed out about it. So we had to add fruit. We had to add like tortillas back and things like that. Like I made my own breads. And I mean, I think every weekend I bake. And so that way he has like chocolate chip muffins or whatever. And it's all from home.
Yeah.
Even when we go to, because he's lactose intolerant, I forgot to mention that. When we go to birthday parties, like I make my own pizza so he can have pizza with the other kids.
Oh, that's lovely.
So like we try to make food at home and whole foods, and it just doesn't, I don't see that it helps.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry. It's very upsetting. I've been trying to get answers and I don't know if I should say this or not, but like I was working with somebody and at first I was like, oh, I think this is going well. And then at the end I was like, I don't think it is, but I learned a few things that I haven't talked about on the podcast yet, but just not a lot of answers in modern Western medicine about gut health issues.
Yeah.
And I wish there were, because even like, what's the med you said he was taking?
Omeprazole.
Spell it.
Oh, I don't know.
I probably found it. Omeprazole, medication commonly used to treat conditions about stomach acid. Okay, so do they think he has reflux? Because this is I almost cursed. And if I curse, I charge myself an editing fee. This is the crap they do. They're like, their stomach hurts. Give them a Pepcid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he used to complain about acid reflux. Like he would describe it as, it feels like there's acid coming up my throat.
He did feel like that. Okay. And this is stopping that.
Yes. And they said it was to treat the gastritis in his stomach.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if is that a real word or is that a word?
Gastritis is a word?
I know it's a word.
It's like inflammation of the stomach.
Yeah. I know it's a real word, but I'm saying, is it a thing that they say that once they don't know what's going on? They're like, you got gastritis.
Yeah. There's something happening there. I don't know.
Have you tried balancing his gut somehow with probiotics or?
I don't think we tried probiotics.
I mean, if he's got like an imbalance in his gut, if there's, certain microbes that he has too much of or too little of, was he ever on a lot of antibiotics as a kid?
No.
All right. Because I was wondering if maybe sometimes you get a lot of antibiotics and it kind of kills off good bacteria and then you can get an imbalance that way. But this is hard to talk about because there's just not enough good science about it. Like I keep wanting to have somebody on to talk about this, but everybody I bump into is like a little like crunchy, you know what I mean? And you're like, I don't really know if you know what you're talking about. And like, I don't want to just have somebody on to talk about their hippie hocus pocus and it not be right. Like I'd like them to know something.
Well, I'll be waiting for that episode when it comes.
Now I got the pressure of helping your kid. Jeez, now it's real. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to try to find more information about that for the podcast. The last thing on your list you said you have a glucagon story. Did you have to use glucagon?
Yes, actually, we even recently had a glucagon story, even after we set this up and I wrote that message. So let's talk about the most recent one first. My son we've had conversations about it and he's 8. He has been giving himself big boluses because I taught him what a super bolus was because I did it once. He's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm just going to give a bunch of insulin right now because you're going to eat this really big meal and we haven't pre-bolus for it. And I don't want you to go high. So I'm just going to cover the carbs and I'm going to cover the high that I know is going to happen, AKA a super bolus, which I went on the podcast, thanks to you. And so he went on his own one day and gave himself a bunch of and we have it capped at a certain amount of units because the Omnipod does that.
Yeah.
And he just gave himself the max amount. Like, I'm going to give myself the max amount so I can have as many cookies as I want.
Oh, he thought if I just put enough insulin, I can just eat unobstructed.
Yes. I said my kid likes to eat, right? And he tells me maybe 30 minutes after the bolus, he's like, hey, Mom, have you looked at my pump? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I gave myself insulin for cookies. I'm like, oh, and we have that open policy because of other experience in the past that if you want a piece of bread, bolus for the bread. He knows, like, if you want a mini croissant, about 12 grams of carbs. Bolus for that, you can have 1 croissant. You don't have to wake me up at 5 a.m. for it. Just, kind of do it. I'd rather that than you go high and not tell anybody you're eating a croissant. Anyway, so he tells me about this big bolus, and I asked him, well, did you eat the cookies then? And he's like, no, actually, I forgot. So you forgot to eat the cookies, but you remembered to tell me about the bolus. I said, okay. I check on his phone. He gave himself 7 units of insulin, which for him
is a lot, right?
I think he put in 150 grams of carbs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All at one time, 30 minutes ago. And he's on FIAS, which for him works really fast. And at this point, I think he was like 90 double arrows down. I was like, oh my God. And instead of just trying to shove carbs in his mouth, I just took I don't want to mispronounce it, but Basquimi.
I think I don't know exactly, but okay. Something like that. That sounds about right.
Put in the nose, and we just, I put it in his nose. I had him inhale it. He hated it. He said it burned like crazy. And then even after that, I still gave him another juice box just in case, like, that didn't work. It was our first time using Basquimi. And then he leveled out around 70. So I can't imagine what it would have been like if we didn't use the Basquimi.
He never got high afterwards?
No, he didn't get high.
Yeah.
And we actually had to add another juice box like 20 minutes later.
Right. Wow, because that insulin was crushing him right there.
Yes. So I can't imagine what it would have been without it. Like, he needed that glucagon.
The first kid ever to forget to eat cookies.
Yeah, but he remembered to tell me, like, it was funny. I'm like, this is not.
He was proud of himself a little bit, actually, wasn't he? He was like, oh, I really took care of this cookie problem, except the part where I didn't eat the cookies.
Yeah. And once he felt the burn of the Basquimi, he was like, Mom, I'll never do this again. I'm like, yeah, you better not.
My gosh. Well, I mean, there's a lot to say there. Like, you've got a limit on the pump. That's great, because he could have put it even farther, and, it might have happened much faster. He's trying to help himself, which is wonderful. He's 8 and he needs more direction and a little more common sense, maybe. And he'll get that as he grows older. And
exactly.
Yeah. Did you pause, or did you just say to yourself, like, it's been a half an hour. That's a lot of insulin. I got 2 hours down here. I'm going right to this. Did you test with a finger stick even?
I did do a finger stick, and he was with 90 double arrows down. I think he was 75.
Yeah, I was going to say it was really flying down. You probably caught it within minutes of him having a seizure.
Yes. So I didn't even hesitate. I was like, oh, and my husband was like, let's just give him more juice boxes. I'm like, no, so he can throw up while he's seizing on the floor. Like, no, we're just going to do this thing and move on.
Where'd you get the confidence for that?
The podcast. I have so many experiences.
Because you've heard people talk about
1,300 of them.
1,300. I have 1,300 different experiences to draw from. Oh, wow. Oh, it's awesome. I mean, not the part about the too much insulin. It's awesome that you've felt like confident in a situation where most people freeze and spin in a circle, What
was it Jenny who described her being in in a mall once and having to give herself glucagon because she was going low while walking through the mall? And I thought of that when I gave it. I'm like, she gave herself this glucagon so she wouldn't be low while she's sitting down in a mall trying to feel better.
Yeah, I remember that story. Was she pregnant even? No. Was she had just had a baby maybe? I don't remember.
I think she just had a baby.
Yeah,
yes.
I do remember that story. And yeah, she was out shopping, and was she holding the baby, and she sat herself down on the ground. And yeah, no, I remember that story. Okay. Yeah. Oh, she'll love to know that helped you. Oh, that's great.
Yes. That helped me. That I was like, okay, she did this. I got this too, and he'll be fine. Oh,
that's wonderful. Oh, okay. All right. Well, see, what a lovely story. Okay. Let's see. I have artfully avoided using your name today, but that's
okay.
That's neither here nor there.
I do have one more glucagon story.
Before you tell it to me, can I remember to tell your husband that one of my chameleons is from Yemen?
Oh, really? Do you know what part of Yemen? What kind of Yemen is he? The north or south?
He didn't come with a driver's license. I don't know where exactly they're from. It's a veiled chameleon, and they They live in Yemen and I think Saudi Arabia. So they come from like that region right there.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's
I'll
awesome.
let him
Or
know.
she's awesome. I misgendered her.
Yeah.
I hope she doesn't cancel me.
He is proud of his Yemeni heritage. He'll be so excited to hear that.
Is he really? Oh, that's great.
Oh, yeah. We've definitely got Yemeni flags around.
And I've spoken in the Dominican Republic about diabetes.
I heard.
Actually, it just came up Monday or I was in a family event. My nephew's girlfriend was like, you speak places? And I guess when you see me out of context and I'm not like doing the podcast, you're probably like, wait, who's looking for you? So I explained to her some of the stuff that I do. She goes, where do you do it? And I jumped around and I was telling her different places that I've done it over the years. I said, once I did it in the Dominican Republic. And she's like, did they speak English? And I said, no, not really. I spoke through a translator. And so I explained to her how, all that happened. And then I told her my favorite part of my story, which is, of course, that the hotel I stayed in had a guard out front who just stood there with a shotgun. And I remember getting there and walking to the hotel and thinking, did I make a mistake coming here? But I had a lovely time. It was really great. But yeah, there was a man with a shotgun standing outside of my hotel. And I was like, who's he? And she's like, oh, he's security. I was like, okay. I was like,
very common in third world countries.
Yeah. I was like, okay. Yeah, I guess I was happy he was there. But the whole thing was lovely. But yeah, I spoke into a microphone. It went only to a woman in a soundproof booth wearing headphones. She heard what I was saying. Then she spoke into her microphone, and then everyone in the crowd got it through their earphones.
Oh, so they didn't hear you speak. They only heard her.
They heard her, but it was so interesting. It was so interesting to say something and then watch her, like, because I could look her in the face. We could see each other. And so she would absorb it, and then I'd see her understand what I meant. Then she'd, regurgitate it. And then there was a pause, and then I'd watch the people in the crowd get it. And it was so interesting to have it slow down like that, to see it happen. And then I remember 15 minutes into it, I was like, I'm going to try to be funny just to see if it translates, So I said the thing and then I paused and now I'm looking at the translator thinking, oh my God. And then she smiled. I was like, oh, okay. She sees the humor. And then she said the thing and then the crowd laughed. And I was like, this is magical. I was like, really, really interesting.
It's a little lag, but I guess that works.
Yeah, I'm telling you though, there was something about the lag that just made it super interesting. I don't 100% know how to explain it. I was like, I wonder if this is going to translate. You know what I mean? And then it did. Because
not all things can be translated, literally, like if you make a phonetic joke, how does that translate?
I don't know. I was fascinated by the whole thing. I really did enjoy it. Anyway, go ahead. Do you have another glucagon story? Tell it to me.
Yes, one more. I believe my son was 5 and he was feeling really, really sick. I think he got the flu. He got something, a stomach bug, and he couldn't keep anything down. And we were on the Dash, so we were manual at that time. And, we shut off basal. He was at a point where he was honeymooning really hard and he was at 0% basal anyway, or 0 units of basal an hour. And he just kept tanking. So we took the Gvoke pen.
Gvoke HypoPen. Yeah. Oh, the vial. The what was that? The HypoPen. No.
Yeah, the hypo. No.
Anyway, go ahead. You used Gvoke.
Yeah. Yes, we used the glucagon in the vial, and we just drew some up, and then I would just give him little amounts to keep him stable, and that worked. And that's my other non-crazy glucagon story. That we used it in a totally different way. He couldn't keep any food down, but you were able to use the glucagon to keep his blood sugar up while he was really sick.
So you microdosed the glucagon?
Yes, we didn't give the full amount. No.
Okay. Yeah, I think because they're a sponsor, I have to say that you used it off label and that I don't think you should do that. But I know a lot of people do that. And it's interesting. I've been talking about microdosing GLPs lately with people. And it hasn't really been on the podcast yet, but I'm going to have some more people on to talk about it. And, an example of, the GLP medications come out in these pre-measured vials, and type 1s are using them off label and finding help with insulin resistance, among other things. But some of them just need it for the insulin resistance. but now their appetite's being suppressed and other thing. They're like, well, I want to eat. Like I wasn't looking for that to happen. And now you're seeing people start to microdose their GLPs off label again. But I'm very hopeful that they will make it available for type 1s in the future so that, you're not limited to like 2.5 milligrams or 2.4 milligrams as your smaller dose. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you talked to your doctor and your doctor was like, look, we're just going to inject this much of it. We don't need the full impact of it. So anyway.
I really want them to test out GLPs with pediatrics because I hear so many things about it helping with acid reflux.
Yeah.
Like Zepbound. And I'm just like, man, I know that would help my kid.
I'm telling you right now, I don't have acid reflux anymore because of GLPs.
Right.
Yeah. And my iron level doesn't drop anymore because I'm absorbing my nutrients better.
My sister is super iron deficient. No matter what she does, she always has to get infusions.
Yeah.
Because of her iron. And I'm just like, man, I don't know. I really want more testing to be done in the pediatric world with GLPs because I know I'm never going to be able to get it for him at this point.
Does your sister have any weight issues? Could she qualify for like Wegovy or Zepbound?
No, no, I don't think so.
I was like, that's a shame. But no, but like I was looking for.
Well, I've tried to hustle some off of my aunt that came over and did nothing. I'm still waiting for her response. Let's see.
Just to see if it helps. Like, because I'll tell you, I had reflux like my whole life, like to the point where I don't know how much I've talked about it, but like I was told, at my last scope, like a couple of years ago, like I have to watch for Barrett's, which is like a precursor to, esophageal cancer and, from the reflux, but I just do not have reflux anymore. And the GLP is definitely what stopped it. Like from my perspective.
That's what I'm worried about. For my son, like all the stomach problems, all the acid. I'm like, what is this? He's 8.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? What is this going to be like when he's 40, when he's 60? I don't know. So I'll let you know if I get my hand on a GLP and I do it.
Yeah. I want to hear more. I think we're going to be talking about them for years on the podcast for a number of different reasons too. So I'm excited to see. Okay. Well, you were terrific. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so glad we talked. I'm so excited that my voice and my story and the things that I had to say get to be part of like this podcast.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, sincerely, I've had people say at the end of their episode, like I'll get done recording and we'll talk for a minute or two afterwards. And they'll be like, well, if you end up using this one, and I'm like, how many of these do you think I record and I don't use? She goes, oh, I don't know. I imagine like I'm like, everyone. I use every one. I've had like a small handful of times where there's been something crazy happen and people are like, don't put that out or, like that's pretty much it. Like, it's not like I hear it and I go, oh, that one's not a good podcast. I think people coming on and telling their story, I don't know that I or anyone else singularly can decide, is this valuable? Because someone's going to find something in it really valuable. And that's, to me, is like just it. I've told this story before, but I finished, and I hope the person never figures out who I'm talking about, but I finished one recording one time and I thought, this is horrible. Like oh my God, it was so boring. I hated the conversation. I hated being involved in the conversation. No matter what I did, I couldn't find a way to make it interesting for me. And I thought, this is the one. I'm going to can this one and I'm not going to put it out. Right. And then I went through the editing process and it came back to me. And I was like, you know what? Who am I to say what's interesting? Like, it's not that I didn't like the person. I was so bored, like so bored by the conversation. And I swear to God, I put it out and it sticks out in my head as being one that I heard so many good things back through social media about. And I was like, oh my God, like people love this.
People are in totally different places in their lives.
Yeah. Everyone's not me is what it taught me. And not that I didn't know that, but like, you know what I mean? Like anyway, I will not tell you which one it was, but it bores the living shit out of me.
I've thought that about one or two also. I'm listening. I'm like, I can't, this is too slow. Next episode. I can't do it.
And maybe that is more about it, is that I have like a pace that I speak at. And it took me mean, the podcast has taught me so many things, like, right. Like it's been of real value to me as well. And not just about diabetes either. Like I know for sure if you go back far enough, I'm talking over people, which is not a thing I do anymore. It's not that I wasn't listening to them. It's like I'd get excited to say something and you like don't know how to hold your thought because you're afraid you're going to pass it by and then it's not going to fit. But I figured out it's okay if that happens sometimes and, let people speak. I've also learned that there are times where people just don't speak very much. They want to come on, but they don't have a lot to say. So I feel for them. And every once in a while I get a note back like, you didn't let that lady talk. And I want to respond and be like, if I wouldn't have said anything, she wouldn't have said anything. Like, you know what I mean?
Maybe
like
they're so used to listening to you.
And that happens too sometimes. I think sometimes people come on and they turn into a listener. They're so used to listening to the show. They're almost like waiting for me to entertain them.
Yeah, I have to remind myself, even through this conversation, I'm like, this is a discussion.
Yeah. I'm not waiting for him to tell me something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I can also misinterpret that. Like I can think, oh, they're not talking a lot. I need to fill, when maybe what I should be thinking is like, no, tell me, like, it's okay to talk. It's been a great experience. Like not only do I get better at diabetes for my kid, and, not only do I like get to have conversations where I'm like, wow, you're microdosing GLPs. Like, tell me more about that. Like stuff that I wouldn't have learned about just being in my house by myself, but it's also taught me, I think, to be a better communicator. I don't think I was bad to begin with. And, it's just been a real joy for me. So I appreciate you adding your voice to it as well.
I have a question for you.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. How does it feel having your diabetic daughter, having Arden out of the house and having less diabetes? I don't want to call it a burden. Diabetes tasks to do a day.
Yeah. I mean, the flippant answer is it's awesome, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like,
I would think it's stressful.
You see, I take your point about like what happens, like when I put so much of my time and my life into this thing. And then one day the kid's like, I'm going to go now. And they're gone. It is a multi-tiered experience. So in the beginning, you're just like, oh, that's it. She got diabetes when she was 2. She's leaving for school. She's 18. I kept her alive for 16 years with diabetes, and now she's going to die. That is how it felt at the beginning. I'm like, that's it. It's over. I just sent her off to die, like is how it felt. And then I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. Does it happen to somebody? It does, but it's not that common. And this is going to be okay. Like there's going to be bumps along the way, and it's going to be scary for me and for her and for my wife, but and maybe even her new roommates. Like it becomes a bigger thing. You kind of expand your sphere a little more around it, and you're thinking. My biggest concern was what a lot of people's concerns are, which is for 16 years, Arden never woke up once when she had a problem. Never. And I've told stories about her eating bananas in her sleep. She never woke up. Alarms blaring, high blood sugars, low blood sugars, doesn't matter. She wasn't waking up. But what she told me is as soon as it became hers completely, that was it. She started waking up.
It was a mind shift for her.
And she could not even explain why. She's like, now I wake up. And she goes, I maybe don't sleep as soundly. I'm not sure, but I take care of myself. Now, we still follow her Dexcom. And there were a handful of times in the first year of college where we had to wake her up to take care of herself, where maybe she wasn't going to wake up in time and she was going to get too low. But, that all worked just like it worked in the house, right? Like, instead of up the hall, she's, 700 miles away. So your biggest concern is like, what if she doesn't wake up when I call?
Right.
And most of the time she did call. And then there's that like, hey, and she's like, and I'm like, Arden, you're low. I need you to drink a juice. Like, okay. And then I'm like, I'm going to stay on while you drink the juice. She goes, you don't have to. And then she hangs up and I'm like, oh, I'm like, so now you're like, I don't know if she drank the juice. So you sit up and you wait. And you wait and you're like, you're trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. But what if she was low enough that she just kind of couldn't do it? And like that anxiety is there. And then her blood sugar starts to go back up and you go, oh, she did it. And then you go back to sleep. There's a couple of times where it didn't work and I had to wake her up again. There's a couple of times where the phone rang and she didn't wake up. I sent a find my iPhone message that like jolted her out of bed. And one time while she was at college, I had my finger on the button to call a roommate. I had it there. And I was like, I'm going to call a roommate. And I know the cascading event that's going to happen. Either she's really in trouble and I'm about to save her, or she already took care of this. She's asleep and I'm going to piss her off. So I'm going to wait as long as I can. And you're trying to keep in mind that the CGM's probably really behind real time and she looks lower than she is, or she's lower than she, you're like, oh. And just as I went to push the button, I thought, let me call her one more time. And I called her and she woke up. And I was like, hey, are you okay? You're low. She goes, I ate gummy bears like 10 minutes ago. I'm going to come back up in a second. I was like, okay, goodbye. And I hung up. And literally like that, the next reading on the CGM was like 20 points higher. And
so it's same stress, but different scenarios.
Yes. So the players are different and the distances are different, but it feels exactly the same way. But as time went on, and as we, even fine tune algorithms even better, learn about like walking from this class makes me low, so I'll eat something before I walk. Like the little things that you figure out, those lows become, they were already very infrequent, but you can almost make them not exist because it's still a repeatable process. She's getting up, she's doing a thing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You kind of figure out where to like put your efforts to stop those things from happening. And then for that, we never had an emergency, like, oh God, she's going to die. Like that thing that I was so frightened about never happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, that's good.
Yeah, so that's it. But on the psychological side, it's less for me and my wife. And so there's a relief for you personally, but then it's just replaced with a guilt because you understand that work doesn't disappear. It just transfers to her.
Yeah. I think about that with school now. Like he's starting to text me for snack times and things. I'm like, man, he's the only kid that has to text his mom for, hey, I want to eat.
Yeah.
What do I need to do? Like, or hey, Naz, you're on the bus. You need gummy bears. Okay, how many? Like he has to count the gummy bears. So yeah, I think about
it's
that.
Those little things that you'd wish people didn't have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if this was 30 years ago, he wouldn't know he was low or high, and he'd just live his life, and he'd wake up one day and be one of these stories that, you hear from like the old heads that are like, I can't feel my toes, but that's the only thing that happened to me. And they're thrilled about it because they're like, I thought I was going to die, but I'm alive, but I can't feel my toes. And you're like, things are much better now than they were. And they'll
so much better.
Yeah. And they'll keep getting better. Listen, I know it's not on label, but adding a GLP to Arden's life significantly reduced her need for insulin, and it significantly helped balance her blood sugars out even more. So, wait a couple more years till medicine figures that out and they start prescribing that for type 1s, and you're going to see another like significant lift in outcomes and day-to-day stress.
It's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, no, I think it really will. I mean, it's not fast enough for everybody, but it's happening. So, yeah. Okay. You were terrific. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Now, let's see. An hour and 15 minutes later. Thalia? Did I do it?
Yes.
Did I do it?
Thalia.
Yeah,
that was good.
I got
Thalia.
it. God damn right.
Yeah.
That's what you should remember going away.
You got it.
Also, I mispronounce other people's names too, all the freaking time. It doesn't have to be a Dominican name. I mean, you guys know I can't say water. Yeah. So.
Well, when we named my son, his name is Nasser. I was like, nobody's going to be able to pronounce that. It was like the first thing. I'm like, we got to name him something that everybody can pronounce. And his name is still something complicated. Nasser. So we just say Naz.
Oh, I shouldn't say people's names. My daughter has a friend whose father is Ethiopian. Mm-hmm. Her name's Nasra. Very pretty name.
Nasra. Oh, that's a nice name.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. I like when people have different names.
If I ever have another daughter, her name is going to be Zahra. And then people are going to struggle with that too.
Oh, I am so glad you didn't say Arden, because that would piss her off, just so you know. if I came to her one day and said, somebody did it, by the way. Somebody who listens named their baby Arden.
No.
And they told me about it, sent me a picture of the baby, and it was beautiful. And I showed it to Arden. She goes, ugh.
Babies are being named after her.
She was so, I can't tell you how irritated she was.
I know, she found that cringy.
She was like, that's my name. And I was like, well, now it's that baby's name too. And I was like, other people name their babies Arden and they don't know who you are. And she goes, whatever.
Are there any Scott babies?
Not yet. But one of you is going to stop letting me down and do it eventually.
Maybe.
I don't think so. You're referring to something that I joke about on the podcast. I'm like, when am I going to get a baby named after me?
Mm-hmm.
I get license plates. And to be honest, I think that's great.
Yeah, I really like the license plates. I'm trying to convince myself I need one.
Gonna get a Juicebox license plate?
Yes, it would be amazing.
You'll probably just get a bunch of like young guys come up to you and think that it's about drinking.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I hope not. Okay.
All right.
Nah, you're making it easy. I'm trying to convince myself and you're not helping.
Yeah, I'll talk you out of it. Don't worry about it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm gonna say goodbye now. Hold on 1 second, okay? Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. Thanks for tuning in today, and thanks to Medtronic Diabetes for sponsoring this episode. We've been talking about Medtronic's MiniMed 780G system today, an automated insulin delivery system that helps make diabetes management easier day and night. Whether it's their meal detection technology or the Medtronic extended infusion set, it all comes together to simplify life with diabetes. Go find out more at my link, medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox. Are you starting to see patterns, but you can't quite make sense of them? You're like, oh, if I bolus here, this happens, but I don't know what to do. Should I put in a little less, a little more? If you're starting to have those thoughts, if you're starting to think, this isn't going the way the doctor said it would, I think I see something here, but I can't be sure. Once you're having those thoughts, you're ready for the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. It begins at episode 1000. You can also find it at juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu, and you can find a list in the private Facebook group. Just check right under the featured tab at the top. It'll show you lists of a ton of stuff, including the Pro Tip series, which runs from episode 1000 to 1025. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.